Well, I've got 6 p.m. on my clock. I think we have everybody we need for this first case. So with that in mind, I will call us to order. Board of Zoning Appeals, the City of Westminster is now in session. Tuesday, April 6th, 2021. First order of business is approval of minutes of our work session from March 17th, 2021. Do I have a motion
I'll make a motion to approve.
as
I
written?
second. I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Unanimously passed. If it's okay with you, Drew, we'll work out a time and I'll come sign that.
Sounds good, Mr. Chair.
We'll proceed to case number 21-02. An application by 150 Grappling LLC, the applicant and property owner, Tuck Rentals LLC, requesting approval of a special exception to operate a private indoor recreational facility subject to the requirements of 164-155.2. Use to be located at 7 Tuck Road, Suite G, Westminster, Maryland, pursuant to zoning ordinance Article 10 IR, that's restricted industrial zone, Section 164-54K as in kilo, special exceptions. Who do we have representing Tuck or 150 Grappling?
Me, Mr. Chairman, Logan Yachts, 150 Grappling.
Are you going to be the only one, or do you have others who will testify?
I have my I have my business partner, Matt Malone, and then I have the property owner, Mark Small, and then I also have the neighboring business from the Auto Plus, Howard Bitzel. Is that correct? Yep.
Okay,
They're-
if I
they're
could
here if
have
you
you
need-
all in the view of your camera.
Okay.
I would ask you all to raise your right hand and do you swear
Got
or
you.
affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you are about to give is the truth?
Yes,
Yeah,
I do.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll turn it over to you and you can proceed with your presentation.
Oh,
Oh,
thank
I'm
you.
sorry. Let me back up. It's kind of anxious to get rolling here tonight, I guess. Let me defer back to Mr. Gray for the staff report.
All right, and Mr. Chair, thank you. And you can see the slideshow?
Yes, I can.
Okay. This case is for a special exception use for a private indoor recreational facility subject to the requirements of 164-155-2, located at 7 Tuck Road, Suite G. The applicant had provided the board a pre-hearing statement that has addressed section 164-155-2 of the city zoning ordinance. However, section 164-170A, conditions for grant of special exceptions, has not been currently addressed by the applicant. The applicant should provide testimony addressing this provision of the ordinance. Please note that staff coordinated the water and sewer allocation review, and it was determined that this project will use less than 100 gallons per day and will thus not require a water and sewer allocation. In reference to section 164-155-2A, according to the State Department of Assessments and Taxation, the 7 Tuck Road property is 5.2 acres. The proposal does not appear to meet the 3-acre standard contained in the ordinance. However, it has been determined that the area of all private indoor recreation facilities cannot exceed 3 acres at a property, and the proposed use will operate in an area of approximately 0.115 acres, which includes the building and parking square footage. Therefore, the intent of the zoning ordinance would be satisfied. Additionally, the property would require 108 parking spaces, and 57 are provided for. Please be advised that this is the number not only for 150 Grappling LLC, Mark Small Machine, and Auto Plus, it also includes the parking for Lee Weller Auto Service, since this business is located at the 7 Tuck Road property. The property has several areas where additional parking may be provided to meet the parking requirements. At the time of site development plan, if applicable, The required number of parking spaces will be further evaluated and must be provided. Lastly, the applicant should discuss any signage they are proposing with this business. For the recommendation, zoning administration recommends that the Board of Zoning Appeals conditionally approve the proposed special exception use based on the following: that city staff confirm the property meets the parking requirements as contained in the city zoning ordinance. Mr. Chair, I would like to submit into the record the application as exhibit number 1 and the staff report as exhibit number 2. Thank
Okay,
you, Mr. Chair. The applicant is here to answer any questions, and if you have any questions for me, please let me know. Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Gray. You can enter those as exhibits as noted. And again, your name, please, the person who's going to be first to speak.
Logan Yoxer, Y-O-X.
Okay, Logan, now we're back on you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. If I give you just a quick overlay of what our business is, 'cause I know a lot of people don't understand what 150 grappling means. We're a grappling training center. The plan is to teach submission grappling, which would entail jujitsu, wrestling, sambo, judo, all sorts of non-striking self-defense martial arts training. It's a small, we want us to be a small organization. That's why we have like this location, which is small and manageable. Myself and my partner have been training together for many years, and this has been something we've been working towards, and are both Westminster, Carroll County natives, and really want to get back to our own community. Going with the testimony, in my pre-committing testimony that I sent in, hopefully you guys all receive those packets, if not the email. As the 4 major points that we had to address, the main 2 that we had the issue with was the lot size, which Andrew addressed, of the 5.2 acres. But we do not see, and as Andrew said, we don't think we will go against any of the intent of the provision. And then I'll just skip forward to the parking matter. There's currently 57 spots, which are available for the 3 businesses. As you can see in the picture on the right, 150 would be on the far left of the building, and the very center is where the Auto Plus store is, and on the far right is where Mark's Small Machine Shop is. Now, in total around that building, there's 57 spots. And the requirement for 150 grappling would only be, I believe, Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe there was only 9 spots that might be required based on the square footage and the employee usage. Now, in the time, the only reason the number is as high as it is because the Auto Plus store has a very high square footage, because it's mainly used as a warehouse. It's almost 27,000 square feet. Close to 27,000 square feet. It's a very large building, so it ups the parking requirement. But the landlord here, Mark Small, can tell you that in the 30 years that they've been in this location, and it's been an auto a parts store, and he has been there as the operator of Mark Small Machine Shop, they have never had a full parking lot. The addition, and they can tell you that they believe the addition of 9 will not impose an immediate pressure or an overload or overbearing on the area. As for the Lee Weller,
Can I ask you, let me stop you there and ask you a question, if I may.
Yes, sir.
The initial picture that we got, that's an overhead Google shot
Yes, sir.
that shows the building and has numbers on it. Do those numbers represent the assigned parking spaces for each of those, each area there, each building?
No, sir. I was just trying to label and identify where the parking spots were, because I saw with the overhead that it's hard to actually count each physical parking space. So I was just trying to make it easier. As you can see, like there's a number 6 on the far left.
Yeah.
Like you can't see those spots that are underneath the foliage that is there. So I was just trying to make it very clear and easy to understand.
Per your lease, are you allocated and designated certain spots in front of each of your facilities?
I don't believe so. Not in the lease. No, sir.
So as far as your understanding is, as a leasee, you're not allocated certain spots. You're free to use any spot that's open?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
And kind of ironically, one of the reasons we like this location so much is because there's always open parking. And I know that's one of the big problems people run into when opening a new location. So then in terms of Lee Weller, the building next door that Andrew addressed, they with my quick math, and I quickly spoke to Andrew this morning, but he can fall down on me. They only have 4 employees and a 2-bay garage for an auto service. So I believe that only adds up to 8 required spots. And they actually have the possibility for 33 spots over where they are as well. So if anything, they're overloaded on that side. Which some of those are, that building is leased through you as well, Tuck Reynolds.
Correct.
And some of those spaces could be used for the rest of the building at 7 Tuck Road, sir.
Okay.
Do you have any further questions for me, Mr. Chairman?
No, I do not at this time. Thank you. Does any other members of the board have questions at this point?
I do not, Larry.
I just, I'm referring back to the zoning ordinance 164-169. There's in subsection B, there's a list of factors that we may consider in terms of granting a special exception. There's a couple in there I just like your responses to. They're nothing serious, but I just wanted to go through a couple of them. And I guess the relevant factors that we're supposed to look at, whether it affects the number of people residing or working in the immediate area concerned. Will your facility affect that?
I do not believe so.
Yeah.
I think there's adequate parking, and we have the manager of the place that's immediately next to us. And in fact, I don't think our immediate neighbors in terms of lots next to us are mostly run by the county, such as the Public Works Office, the skate park. And I'm sure if you talk to them, or I don't know if you guys heard anything from them in terms of reports, but I don't believe there's ever been an overflow issue. In fact, I think the only time that the parking lot has ever been full, and you can cover down on me when this, Mr. Mark, the landlord, that is during Fall Fest. And when people need overload space, they actually tend to use the lot up here, sir. So I don't believe it will affect the environment around or have an impact on any other businesses adjacent to.
Thanks. Do you see any effect of odors, dust, gas, smoke, fumes, vibrations, glare, and noise upon the use of surrounding property values? Will it
No,
affect
sir.
those?
No, sir.
Okay. And just one other one here. The traffic conditions. How far away? What's your nearest public
Intersection.
road from there? It's hard to see from what
Is my
Yeah, the-
public what, sir?
public road.
Oh, public road, the Tuck Road itself. So if you're looking at the photo,
Yeah.
or if you look at the left photo with the zoning colors where the purple is,
Yeah.
Tuck Road itself, and I believe Andrew's outlining for you, is the public road there. That goes right to East Middle School from 27. And that's another reason why we actually like that spot, is because it's easily accessible to get you to the highway, and it does not cause an impediment on any residential areas.
Okay, and it looks like it doesn't affect any traffic conditions nearby either. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Yox, let me take you back to Larry's reference. Did you get a copy of the staff summary?
I do not believe so, sir.
Okay. All the items that he's referring to, there's 15 of them. You really need to be able to address all of those. I don't know what I can give you as a reference except to run down the list. But Andrew, you want to respond to that?
Matt, that would have been emailed to you on Friday night. I emailed the Board of Zoning Appeals to pack it out on Friday night.
This was to the staff at 150 Grappling, correct?
Yes, yep. That would have went out Friday night, I think around maybe 5 or 6 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock at night.
The only one I have from you on Friday is the link to here from you, is that I'm
And-
seeing.
And in that email, there should be a hot link where it says link. And in that hot link should be the link to the staff report.
Okay, while he's looking, Ed, from my perspective, the section that says the board may considering the following factors. The ones I'd mentioned are the only ones that I needed answers to. If that makes any difference to you.
No, I understand. I just wanted to make sure that Mr. Yax was aware of
Yeah,
all of those conditions that upon which we may consider or have to consider, and make sure he's fully aware of all of those for this reference and future reference, as well as going through those things that have to be addressed where staff report indicates that applicant that they did not address. So I just want to make sure he's got all that information to work from.
okay.
I see that now, sir.
Understood.
That was a mistake on my behalf.
If
But
you could
I-
just glance down those and see if anything jumps out at you that you cannot meet.
Yeah, I can, yes, I just shouldn't be an issue. I don't see there's any issues. I'm looking through number 1, 2, growth, the orderly growth of a community. That's kind of what I assume that means. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build a community that gives to Westminster. I don't see any effect on the immediate growth of anyone around us as a hindrance. We already answered the dust, peaceful environment. Yes, and it's going to be an indoor facility. There would be no hindrance outside as well. This type of kind of structure in the city gathering. No, it's not going to affect any public areas. The facility is, as you saw, I got the water report from Andrew. We are within
Yep.
within there. We sent in the application for that, so I think we're good there. Limitations to firefighting. No, there's plenty of active, there's actually a loop around the whole building before the parts delivery as well. So we have adequate space for emergency rescue vehicles. We would not be affecting any historical landmarks. Traffic conditions should not be affected at all. Contribution any such proper use, building additional towards. Any contribution we have to Westminster City, I think would be beneficial since we are in the immediate space of downtown. I think any clients we have would be more than happy to spend their money downtown and get a nice something to eat down there as well. So looking real quick, Mr. Chairman, at that list of 15, I do not see any hindrances or any reason why we would affect any of those
Okay.
points.
Good. I thank you for just, at least becoming aware. And now that you have the whole reference, I just wanted to make sure that you had everything to comment from. So go
Logan,
ahead with the rest of your presentation in terms of where the staff has indicated that they do not believe you had properly addressed certain standards. Starting with that one there on the proposed use would not adversely affect the general plan for the physical development of the district. Basically, the city is saying, while you didn't address it, they think what you're doing is meets the goals, among the goals of the comprehensive plan, but you should be looking at those and trying to address where you didn't address each of those. And if you have anything else to add, then go ahead.
Forward in the first, I see what. Only thing I can say to that is that on the 2009 goal, we are definitely trying to do that with a small group. Actually, the name 150 Grappling it means that we actually only want 150 members at max. Most gyms are in it to try to build a giant clientele and to in turn get a higher income. That's not why we're doing this. We love the town that we're here. I was born and raised in Carroll County, right up here at the hospital, went to McDaniel, and I intend to keep giving back and helping grow the community along part the rest of with the rest of the Westminster community as well. And I don't think our accessibility will hurt that at all. Sir.
All right, keep going from page 5 on. Next one is about health and
The
safety
health
of
and
residents.
health, yes, sir. It should not be affecting. We have no residential properties within adjacent to us, and all the business around. We should have zero negative effects to. If anything, it'll be an increase of having good citizens coming to train, and then make more accessible to their businesses. Then the next one, sir, be overburden of existing public services. It should not be, as we said, we had the
That's
water
all
allocation.
basically- Yeah.
Yes,
and
sir.
you address that on your behalf, really, and basically you don't have any problems there.
No, sir. Again, we want to be a small organization and should not have any effect on it as well. If again, and if anything, the use of us being a small, clean organization should help raise the one for others to join the area. We're talking about C, and should not be a deterrent from anyone from joining the neighborhood. If anything, we should be gathering an example for more people to come and give their business to the city, sir.
Good.
May I also add, I mean, Logan's probably not even aware of this, but your city police department just over the hill, they've started probably about a year and a half ago. We got plenty of room to the backside of this building. It's like a little park, but it's lined with trees. But they actually come up here and do their training exercises during the COVID, because when they were doing them in the parking lots and the people saw them without masks, they were turning them in. So we've allowed them to come up here and do them behind the building in the privacy of that and the tree alignment. So that works out well for them.
Thank you. And would you please identify yourself for the record?
I am Mark Small. I'm the owner of Tuck Reynolds and Mark Small Machine.
All right, thank you.
Sir, Mr. Chairman, I believe I answered everything on page 5. I don't see anything that I didn't answer in the testimony that we have presented. Was there anything else I was missing?
From that point on, from my read, you addressed the parking and everything else, unless you've got anything else you want to add, or you want to have the other folks there that you have to testify, if you want to give them an opportunity to present. If you're done, you can call on them, and then we'll have you present a summary if you choose to, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Howard, I know you're a huge talker. This is Howard Bitzel. He's the manager, main operator next door to where we'd be operating at Auto Plus. And we've talked to him a bunch about our business plan, and you can just, if you feel as if we're going to affect any of these things at all.
I just think it would be beneficial to have a business next to us that's, other than just Auto Plus or Auto Parts, and that, because it'll bring people in and it'll probably bring some retail service, retail business to us also. And as far as the parking goes here, like everybody's already voiced, and the landlord also, that we've never, ever had an issue with any kind of parking here whatsoever.
Good, that's good to hear. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Additionally, this is an old building. I know I put this in the pre-testament hearing, and you can see that if you follow down to the next page of what we were just talking about with the staff report. This building was also made in 1946. It's been here for a long time. It's been a kind of in terms of industrial, it's been here in Westminster for a very long time.
It's what's the name's road.
The
road is named after.
Right. So we're not working with anything crazy new. We're not doing, there's no structural changes coming along with this. It all started with just a change of use permit that we were trying to get. Before I do my summary, Mr. Chairman, is it okay if I open up to the board for any further questions?
Sure.
Board members, is there anything you'd like to hear from me before I conclude?
No, Logan, if I remember correctly, this is just going in the same footprint as something that's healthcare / exercise related. That's what moved out of there, correct?
Yes, ma'am. So prior to us, it was called TheraFit, and it was a rehab facility, which kind of matches our business model slightly because it was a physical service that was given with low occupancy. Again, if you refer to our the occupancy to us based on the space given to us by the county is only at max occupancy of 25 people. It had a low impact on everyone else around them, if zero impact at the time. And before that, it was actually a hot tub dealership, which I've never got to speak with the owners or anything of that time, but I heard no complaints from the landlord or the tenants next to them when it was a retail facility. Does that answer your question, ma'am?
Yep.
I have nothing further.
All right, go ahead with your summary.
All right, in summary, sir, we are a small business that we were asking for an exception. We know the parking spaces may not fit the city requirements, but we don't see any hindrance with the parking available. And we also don't see any hindrance on the environment around based on our business model and the location that we are. And we only believe that we're going to be a positive addition to the businesses of Westminster City.
Okay. If there's nothing else, then we officially at this point, let me just ask the board if they have any final questions before we do that. I would guess not.
I
Mr.
don't.
Chair? Oh.
Yes. Andrew, go ahead.
Sorry, if Commissioner, Board Member Frazier, if you would like to go first.
Do what? I'm sorry.
Oh, I thought you had a question. I just
No,
wanted
she
you to
Oh,
didn't.
no. I'm sorry. I said I don't have
Oh.
anything further. Sorry.
No, you're
What
fine.
am I supposed to do?
And Mr. Chair, if I would just like to add with the city staff recommendation and or a condition about confirming that the property meets the parking requirements as contained in the city zoning ordinance, will work with the gentleman at 150 Grappling, Matt and Logan, just to confirm that it does meet the parking requirements. And that is why we would like that as a condition. We can meet with them afterwards just to make sure and confirm with the adjacent Lee Weller use and the Lee Weller business and the parking right out in front of 150 Grappling. And Mr. Chair, that is all that I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we close
Mr.
testimony.
Chair?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I would like to make sure we've identified the exhibits, that we're clear that we have the application, the pre-hearing statement, as well as the staff report.
Yes, that's correct. I don't think we have anything else that was entered.
So we have the 3 exhibits were all entered.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. Thanks for keeping me honest here. At this time, then we will close testimony. Is there any further discussion by the board or a
Not me.
motion?
Yeah, I move that we approve the special exception as requested by the applicant with the condition that the property meets the city's parking requirements.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
In favor?
Lee Wellers.
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimously approved. So within about, let's say 30 days, Karen, does that meet your standard? Okay.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
We will have a report out that then we can give you the final results of, but you basically have been approved for your special exception. So thank you all for your attendance and interest, and I guess you can leave us now and we'll start a new one, another case.
Mr. Chairman, do you mind if I ask a question real quick, just because I'm new to all this?
No, not at all. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So from here, I know initially we were just waiting, we needed the city's approval so we could get an inspection by the county. Will someone from, I'm assuming Andrew, it seems like he's the guy who runs or runs the public works, be in contact with someone over at the city in order for us to, the county, sorry, with the county in order to continue?
Go ahead and address that, Andrew, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What will happen is the city of Westminster cannot sign off on the city portion of the Carroll County building permit application until after the final decision has been approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals. So once the signed decision has been signed by Chair Kramer, that decision would be forwarded to you and the board members. And then subsequently, right after that decision that has been signed and sent, then any building permits would be approved. But before any building permits would be approved, since the board voted with the one condition, that condition would have to be met. So between this time and when the board's decision has been crafted and approved, we can review the parking requirements out at the site and we can get that completed. So when the board's decision has been finalized, we can move forward ASAP.
Okay, so I assume it's gonna be you that we're gonna be in contact with still then.
Correct.
Mr. Gray. All right,
Yes.
all right, thank you, sir.
So generally speaking, Mr. Yax, at the latest, when we meet again, our meetings are always on the first Tuesday of each month, if we have a case. If we don't, we can still approve the findings. And so 30 days should be about the extent of it.
Okay.
Nothing else gets in the way. So,
Thank you, sir.
all right, thank you very much,
Okay.
all of you.
Goodbye. Wait.
All right, Andrew, what do you want to do in terms of wrestling up the next case?
And Mr. Chair, Mr. Depot will be taking care of this case.
Okay,
Good evening. I have no PowerPoint for this case. The appellant, this is BZA case 2103, appeal of zoning determination. The appellant is appealing the January 26, 2021 zoning administrator's determination in which the zoning administrator responded to a request to use an off-premise freestanding business sign by Mission Barbecue, or in this case, the appellant. Mission Barbecue is located on the southwest side of Baltimore Boulevard, Maryland 140, approximately.
Mark,
Yes,
if I may, let me stop there because I think probably what I need to do is introduce this case on the record here first.
no, I'm sorry. Yes, I apologize. I jumped the gun that time.
Good, I'm glad I'm not the only one. Let me just read this into the record. We are have closed case 21-02, and now we're moving on to case number 21-03. This is an appeal by Mission Barbecue regarding a zoning determination made by the City of Westminster's Director of Community Planning and Development related to the use of an existing off-premises freestanding sign for property located at the 140 Village Shopping Center, Lot 4, account ID 07-063318, pursuant to zoning ordinance section 164-161A, bow-legged 1, and section 164-121A. Okay, I guess we'll now move back to you, and this represents basically your, I guess, the staff summary.
Yes, may take some time, so I apologize to get through everything. Again, the Mission Barbecue is located on the southwest side of Baltimore Boulevard, Maryland 140, approximately 680 feet northwest of the Malcolm Drive, Maryland 140 intersection. The notice of hearing requirements for this appeal have been met as described in the staff report. Foreseeing some brief background, on June 11th, 2020, the Planning and Zoning Commission approved Mission Barbecue Site Plan S1915, of which no freestanding signage was approved by the commission with S1915. On August 25th, 2020, staff met with Kelly Schaefer Miller, the appellant's agent, to discuss Mission Barbecue signage. At this meeting, staff stated that the zoning ordinance does not allow for the use of the subject existing off-premise freestanding business sign. And any proposed freestanding business sign must be located on the premises of the business, in this case, Mission Barbecue, the sign is directing attention to. On August 28th, 2020, city staff emailed Ms. Schaefer reiterating staff's position regarding the off-premise freestanding business sign. And then on November 25th, 2020, Ms. Schaefer requested a determination regarding whether the subject off-premise freestanding sign may be used by Mission Barbecue Restaurant. On December 3rd, 2020, staff spoke again with Ms. Schaefer, reiterating again staff's position regarding the off-premise freestanding sign. On January 26, 2021, the requested zoning determination was completed and emailed to Ms. Schaefer, again, consistent with past determinations regarding the off-premise sign. On February the 25th, 2021, Ms. Schaefer submitted an application for an administrative appeal for Mission Barbecue, appealing the January 26th zoning determination. The appellant's complete basis for appeal is found in attachments 3, 4, and 5 of the staff report. As stated in the background provided in the staff report is much lengthier. Staff believes that it does represent that the planning department did provide timely responses to Mission Barbecue's requests, questions, and correspondence, and that the zoning administrator's position and interpretation of the zoning ordinance regarding the subject off-premise freestanding sign has not altered or wavered. As a preliminary matter, the zoning administrator notes that the appellant has not provided any information demonstrating any error in the subject zoning determination under appeal based on the zoning ordinance, the document that regulates signage in the city of Westminster and the B Business Zoning District, and has not clearly specified the grounds for appeal. Furthermore, several statements set forth in the appellant's pre-hearing statement are misleading and or incorrect regarding the subject Mission Barbecue property, and that the location of the subject existing off-premise freestanding sign. To be clear, Mission Barbecue is located on a separate and distinct property from that of the property on which the off-premise freestanding business sign is located. This is an important distinction that was applied in the crafting of the zoning determination and the information provided in the report, clarifying the zoning administrator's position. The zoning administration initially questioned whether Mission Barbecue has standing to appeal the zoning determination. A party must be aggrieved in order to have standing to pursue an appeal of the zoning determination. In this case, Mission Barbecue is not the owner of the property the Mission Barbecue restaurant is located, or the adjacent property on which the off-premise freestanding business sign is located. These two properties are owned by a separate entity, 140 Village Limited Liability Partnership. Furthermore, Mission Barbecue is not aggrieved or harmed due to the zoning determination. On December 4th, 2021, the city of Westminster approved sign permit applications 1779, 1780, and 1781 for 3 Mission Barbecue wall-mounted signs totaling 237 square feet, which is the total amount of signage permitted for Mission Barbecue or any other use in the B business zone, without exhausting other remedies or administrative processes. If the Board of Appeals finds that Mission Barbecue has standing to appeal the zoning determination, the zoning administrator offers the following information supporting the determination.
Let me stop you there for a minute, Mark. In a prior brief discussion with our attorney, the question of the fact that you bring up the question of whether or not the appellant has standing, I think needs to be addressed before we go further. Am I correct in that, Karen?
I would advise you to address that issue first, because if you find that there is no standing, then there's no sense in going on with the hearing.
That's what I kind of thought. I understood. So let me stop there. And let me just open it up for the board to see if there are questions that are being raised then about whether or not the appellant has standing to challenge the decision of the zoning administrator here.
Mr. Kramer, might I say that you
Yes.
may want to give Ms. Miller an opportunity to address the issue of standing before you discuss it among the board?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Sure.
Just excuse me, putting a procedure here is, I mean, this issue of standing is really a legal issue that the board has to address. I'm not sure other, excuse me, I'm gonna mute. Nope, never mind. But before we do go beyond this, I think Ed's right. We need, I guess, an opinion from council. And I guess you're suggesting that we hear from Ms. Miller first.
Correct. So the city has raised the issue of standing. I don't know whether Ms. Levan wants to add anything at this point before you turn it over to Ms. Miller, but I think that she should have an opportunity to address the issue as well.
Well, let me start with Ms. Levan. Do you have any comments to make in addition to what Mr. Depot put forward?
I do, in the context of land use decisions, there are two kinds of standing. There is standing of a property owner and as an aggrieved party, and then there's taxpayer standing. Taxpayer standing isn't applicable here because it is a kind of standing that is invoked when the entity wishing to appeal is alleging a general harm to the taxpayers as a whole and not a specific individual personal grievance. And the cases are clear that when you're talking about aggrieved party status, that standing, that you have to be a property owner, that there is no standing for non-property owners.
Okay. Board members have any questions of Ms. Levan? All right.
Not at this time.
Ms. Miller, I just failed to welcome you. I'm sorry. Would you like to go ahead and comment at this point?
I would, yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Kelly Schaefer Miller, 73 East Main Street, Westminster, Maryland, 21157. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant, Mission Barbecue. I think it's unclear. It's completely clear to me that Mission Barbecue has standing here. Mission Barbecue is the lessor of this premises owned by 140 Village Partnership, Limited Partnership. I forget their exact entity name, 140 Village Limited Liability Partnership, excuse me, who's also joined the application, signed the application, and has a representative here with us tonight. Mission Barbecue desires to utilize a sign for their site, which has historically always been used for the site, and the zoning administrator came back with an interpretation against Mission Barbecue. So I don't know how there's more of an example of an aggrieved party than that. But I would say to you that they're absolutely an aggrieved party. I also would refer you to, I believe some of the case law cited by Mr. Depot in his staff report is talking about the aggrieved party in the sense of when you see neighborhood opposition to projects and the proximity and location to the neighborhood opposition, when neighbors often take appeals of cases like this. That's really what is most often considered when looking at the aggrieved party standard in terms of location. The point being to prohibit a neighbor 5 miles, 10 miles, 20 miles down the road from bringing an appeal and holding up and preventing a project when they really have there's really no impact to them. I think that's the appropriate way to look at the aggrieved party standard that Mr. Depot has suggested in his staff report. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but I truly believe that there's no more aggrieved party than Mission Barbecue as an applicant with a negative zoning determination against them. And I'll add one additional thing. To say that Mission Barbecue is not an aggrieved party gives them no additional recourse, which the entire purpose of the code is to provide applicants with an opportunity to appeal to this board when there's an error by an administrative official, which is exactly what we're doing here in this case. If we did not have this opportunity, then I guess that would be to say that no one has any recourse beyond that. So, thank you.
Okay. In response to what Ms. Miller just said toward the end of her comments there, let me come back to Mr. Depot, because right toward the end of your comments before you moved on to standing, you referenced the signage and the total square footage of the signage, but then commented about the fact that Mission Barbecue apparently did not come back to the city to ask if that's the right way to state it, where you say that without exhausting other remedies and administrative processes. What other remedies and administrative processes might there have been? I think you're muted, Mark.
I apologize. There were other options that the applicant could pursue, legal options versus using an off-premise sign, which again, we're arguing they cannot use. Currently, this property has a non-conforming freestanding sign on it. It's the sign of the shopping center is located on the Mission Barbecue property. So their option would be to remove that sign that is on the Mission Barbecue property and provide a freestanding sign for Mission Barbecue on its property legally, as long as it met the requirements of the ordinance for signage. So there is that option. There's also an option that we recommended, and it is a boundary line adjustment. The Mission Barbecue property and the adjacent property are owned by the same entity. So them amongst themselves could certainly do a boundary line adjustment whereby the freestanding sign in question could be then located on the Mission Barbecue property. This is exactly what happened with another case that's referenced in the staff report, where an existing freestanding sign was to be located on a different property and was required to locate it on the property of the business it was advertising. So we feel there were legal remedies that could be done by the applicant that would not follow through or in this case, by the applicant versus trying to use a sign that otherwise is not allowed to be used.
Had this freestanding sign, when it apparently was used by Friendlies when they were there, ever been in question before? And as much as Friendlies used it, is the Friendly lot the same as the Mission Barbecue lot? Has that sign ever been in question before?
Yes, the Mission Barbecue property is it's the same location as the Friendly site. So the Friendly restaurant was torn down and Mission Barbecue took its place. Friendly's was using the off-premise sign. It was equally at the same time not located on the property of Friendly's with the most recent site plan. And that site plan did not propose to use that sign. They did, however, we did find out, and there is evidence that the sign was used by Friendly's, but city cannot find any records where the city approved them to use that sign.
Do you have any idea how that was worked out?
I can only assume, but again, the city itself did not approve it. And absent an approved sign permit, it would have been in violation of the zoning ordinance.
Can I jump in for a quick
I was
second?
going to ask
here?
you, Ms. Miller, if you had any evidence.
Well, I just want to say that I think there's a very big differentiation between saying that the city does not have records of and that this was never an approved sign. I was able to pull a county permitting electrically the Friendly sign. Now, this is back in '98, so there's no great description here. I'm not sure if now, I mean, I have a whole presentation prepared, so I'm happy to hold this, but you know, I think it's unfair to say that because we can't find city records that means it wasn't approved. I am not faulting Mr. Depot whatsoever, but I am going to say that I myself have tried to look through old historical city records through files in the basement, and it's been very challenging to find documents. So I again do not fault him or his staff in any regards, because these are older records. The Friendly sign dates back to '98. The Friendly site plan dates back to '97. And prior to that, even the sign was used by a Hardee's restaurant. And like that started in the '70s. But that's just historical knowledge that we have from the property owner. I can't find a record of a permit from the 70s for that sign. The earliest I have is 98.
And again, I can only go off of the site plan itself for the Friendlies that does list the signage that is proposed and approved. And it only approved building mounted signage. It did not approve any signage to be used or be placed on that off-site sign. So when the planning commission approved the Friendly development, there was no freestanding sign approved by the planning commission.
Okay.
May I?
I'm sorry, Ms. Levan, is that,
Yeah. So I
okay?
just want to say that I think Ms. Miller is correct that there is a difference between not having a record and affirmatively having a record that says it's not okay. But Mark and Mr. Depot's search of the city records and his testimony that it doesn't exist in the city's files is it's valid evidence. And we don't have anything from Ms. Miller to the contrary, except the supposition that there might have been and we can't find it. That's not actually evidence. So if she could say, well, it's not dispositive of the fact that there was no approval. If she had one and could bring it forward and say, you know, I don't know why it's in the city's files, but here's a copy. But we don't have anything. We have a search of the city's records that did not turn anything up, and we have nothing that actually controverts that.
Okay. Karen, you're gonna have to help me out here because this is something new. I don't think that I've encountered before as long as I've been on the board is a challenge of standing. What's our next move here to the comment about that Mr. Depot's making about the applicant not having standing?
Well, I would like to ask a question of Ms. Levan, if that's okay.
Sure.
Because what I'd like to explore a little bit is there's the Sugarloaf versus the Department of Environment, wherein the court, I think, talks about a distinction between standing for judicial review versus standing for an administrative hearing. And that there are two different standards, one for judicial review being much different and more stringent. I was wondering if you could address the difference between the two, or at least your understanding of the administrative part.
I don't have anything on that for you this evening.
So my understanding of that case is that the judicial review, the standing for judicial review is what Mr. Depot has articulated, and that standing for an administrative appeal isn't quite as stringent. And in this case, you had a process whereby an applicant could apply for an interpretation, which they've done. And we have a provision in the code that says you can appeal an administrative determination. So the question would be, why would somebody who has gone through that process not have the ability to come before the board on that issue?
Can I just note that the zoning ordinance, the sign ordinance itself indicates that that a application that's submitted on behalf of someone other than the property owner has to also be signed by the property owner. I don't know if that's the case with this application, but I think that would address that question of standing, because ordinarily you would have the property owner before in front of you.
The owner has signed this application.
Can you point us in that direction so that we can verify?
The application package. That's one of the requirements also of submittal, but the application package, it's the page directly after the adjoining property owner list. There's two signature pages attached, and there's one for Mission Barbecue and there's one for 140 Village. Partnership LLP, or I'm sorry, I keep getting it mixed up, but 140 Village Partnership.
And
So the
was the
village one
original,
is Mr. Polikoff,
Yes, that's correct.
and the Mission Barbecue is Mr. Sullivan.
Yes, that's correct. Both of whom are also on the line here this evening.
Okay.
and were they part of the original request for the sign determination?
They were not, neither of them individually signed that. That was a letter authored by myself and signed by myself. There's no zoning determination, like application form or specification set forth. I believe there's like a filing fee in the fee chart for $50. But that was submitted by myself.
On behalf of Mission Barbecue?
On behalf
or-
of Mission Barbecue and with the property owner's consent.
So I guess I would have a question, I guess maybe back to our own attorney here in terms of Mission Barbecue being the, what is it, the leasee or leaseor, which, whatever the proper term is here, in terms of being I guess you cannot be construed as the property owner, but it's leasing the property. But if the property owner is totally informed, does that not connect the two for standing? That's, I guess, a question I have.
I have a similar question, given that most oftentimes, it's the lessee of a property who is bringing these sorts of applications forward with the property owner's signature and consent.
Right.
So is there a question for me or?
Well, I guess, can you address that same question? I mean, in terms of the lessee, with the property owner's consent, obviously, does that not give them the standing as a property owner conjunctively, or is that not?
Well, the way I guess I would look at this is you had a request for an interpretation. If you go back, I'm trying to get to the original request here. Just 1 second. And of course, it's not here.
That's the November 25th letter from Ms. Schaefer. Right?
Right.
I have it in front of me. I mean, I can read it if you'd like. This is on behalf of Mission Barbecue. I write to make two requests concurrently. Mission Barbecue respectfully requests that you make an administrative determination that it can utilize the existing sign at the 140 Village Shopping Center site formerly used for the Friendlies. And two, Mission Barbecue respectfully requests that the administrative modification from the signage square footage requirements to allow for a total of 298.61 square feet of signage from the allowed 237 square feet.
So this request for interpretation on behalf of Mission Barbecue, I don't see a reference to the owner except perhaps in the CCs. Am I wrong, Ms. Miller?
I'm looking right now, sorry.
And then Mr. Depot, when you accepted and responded to this request, there wasn't an indication in your letter that they did not have the right to request the interpretation, correct?
Correct. And as we do determinations, you do not have to be the property owner to request a determination. We have several people that would look to move to a location or to purchase or to locate, and they'd want some official determination as to whether they could do that or not.
So that to me right there answers the question, which is,
Well, I would, again, I think my point was that um, that the appellant or who should have requested the administrative appeal should have been the property owner itself.
I disagree with that, for the reasons that I've already stated, but I'll also say that, the first time this standing issue was raised was by email on Friday evening. How long? A month after, at least a month after the application itself was submitted. And but again, I don't even see that as necessarily mattering. I mean, this directly impacts Mission Barbecue. Mission Barbecue is leasing this premises. Maryland law recognizes even that in certain instances, lessees of premises hold almost akin to a fee simple ownership of property. So I see no reason why this board should accept an argument. The Mission Barbecue is not very clearly an aggrieved party by virtue of the zoning administrator's decision that allows us to appeal to this board here tonight.
And again, I think the other point of why I would feel not aggrieved is, again, they're allowed so much signage on the property and they've met that signage. So any
That's incorrect,
additional
Mr.
signage would
Baker.
require a variance.
No, that's actually incorrect. The signage, and again, I'm prepared to present all of this as part of our presentation. But this, I believe when you were looking at the signage for your staff report, you were looking at the submittal that I made in November. If you look at the actual square footage and the many conversations that you, me, and Mr. Gray had back and forth about calculating square footage, we actually withdrew the second part of that request related to any sort of square footage variance, because the on-building signage that has already been permitted, approved, and installed still allows for us to, if approved here tonight, put in or revitalize the pylon sign without needing any additional variance. So if you'll recall, we had those conversations and then I withdrew the second portion of that initial zoning determination request. And the only thing at issue is really tonight, the only thing at issue tonight is interpreting this one section of the zoning code. It's becoming much more complicated, but at essence, that's truly what's at issue here tonight. It's relatively simple and it's just an interpretation of these few words of the zoning code. But the square footage calculation, and I have representatives from Apple Signs here to testify if necessary, but the square footage is not an issue. There's no variance that would be needed to allow for this sign.
So what you're saying is, Ms. Miller, that given the changes that you made, that the existing signage on building together with the signage, if allowed to use the standalone sign, would total to 37.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
And Mr. Kramer, I would just point the board to 164, 161, which is their power to hear and decide appeals. Where it is alleged there's an error in any order, requirement, decision, or determination made by an administrative official, including the zoning administrator, in regard to the enforcement of the chapter or any ordinance adopted pursuant thereto.
Well, I mean, when I first read that myself, the number one, to hear and decide appeals where it is alleged that there is an error in any order. That was the first thing that struck me. Was there an error on the part of the city in looking at this request and making the decision that Mr. Depo made? And I guess that's, to me, the central issue here, short of the one now that came up reference standing. So I guess we need to resolve the standing issue before we can move forward, I guess. Or am I correct?
Yes, so if the board finds that this matter can move forward, you'll go to the merits of the case.
Well, let me ask the board for their comments on that question. Have we heard enough thus far? And given what we've seen in the reports, in the written reports, to think that we should move forward, that the applicant does have standing to move forward, and then we'll let the rest of the presentations play out and make a determination from there.
I don't know if we need to make a motion, but I do believe that we have enough to move forward to hear the case in full.
Yeah, I would just, make the comment that, I think the definition of the premises is broad enough that would allow, particularly the property, if you define the premises as that owned by the property owner, then both leased properties are owned by the same owner. So I think, we might be stretching a little bit to say that they're not an agreed party. So I don't have anything else that I need to hear to move forward with testimony.
I think I would tend to agree. I mean, I think given the substance of the information and the further detail and definitions that are being put forward, be best to have the whole thing heard out, and then we'll decide from there. So on the issue of standing, do we need a motion, Karen, to move past this or not?
I don't think you need a formal motion. You've just had all three board members say that they find that you can
Okay.
move forward with the case.
All right, then on that basis, I would say that we go ahead and move forward. So we will come back to Mr. Depot and where you left off with, if we decide that appellant has standing, then you have the rest of your presentation to make, I guess.
Thank you. Okay. And we were just speaking of this, the term premises is not defined in the zoning ordinance. The zoning administrator is responsible for the administration and enforcement of the zoning ordinance. On occasion, the zoning administrator is required to define terms in the zoning ordinance that are not otherwise defined. The term premises used throughout the zoning ordinance and the definitions of premises as defined in the Merriam-Webster Dictionary and a Planner's Dictionary, as provided in the staff report, were used to determine the definition of premises. The staff report provides several examples of the use of the term premise in the zoning ordinance that clearly indicate and whereby a reader would reasonably conclude that when uses and structures are located on the premises, on premise, or upon the premises, such uses and structures are located on the property and not on an adjacent or other property. Pursuant to zoning ordinance section 164-121, on-premise business signs pertaining to a use on the premises are permitted as an accessory use in the business zone. Zoning ordinance section 164-3 defines sign business as a sign which directs attention to a business or profession or to a commodity, service, or entertainment sold or offered upon the premises where the sign is located. Again, the zoning ordinance is clear that a sign that is not located on or upon the premises or property of the business, profession, commodity, service, or entertainment to which the sign is directing attention is an off-premise sign. Furthermore, the zoning ordinance does not allow off-premise business signs in the B zoning district. As an example of a freestanding business sign required to be located on premises, staff notes a recent subdivision application and plat titled K&G Properties LLC property for a property also located in the B business zone. The zoning administrator determined that the existing freestanding business sign must be located on the premise or the property of the existing use the sign was advertising. This determination was not appealed and is a thing decided. The zoning determination subject to appeal applies the same determination that an existing freestanding business sign must be located on the premises or property the use's advertising is located. The appellant's response appears to imply that the appellant is asking the board to create a new zoning law or policy by creating a new off-premise freestanding sign type at the property and in the B business zone and other zoning districts. With this misinterpretation of the zoning ordinance, the board would create a new off-premise freestanding sign type not currently listed or permitted in the zoning ordinance. And just to be advised or to note, the board has no legislative power, therefore it can neither make or modify the city's of Westminster's zoning laws or policies. In response to the appellant's statements regarding the use of the off-premise freestanding sign by the Friendly's Restaurant previously located at the property, the appellant is correct that the off-premise freestanding business sign was in use by the former Friendly's Restaurant. However, city records indicate that the use of the existing off-premise sign by former Friendly's did not receive approval by the city. Furthermore, the Friendly's Restaurant site development plan did not propose any on-premise or off-premise freestanding business signs. The former Friendly's Restaurant closed on or about November 27, 2018, and has since been razed, and the new Mission Barbecue Restaurant is currently constructed and operating. Pursuant to zoning ordinance section 164-125, non-conforming signs, the existing off-premise freestanding sign is a non-conforming sign. Furthermore, pursuant to zoning ordinance section 164-125B, no non-conforming sign shall be worded to advertise any other use than was advertised at the time it became non-conforming. Because of this, the sign could not be used again, and pursuant to section 164-125D and 164-126 should be removed.
All right, can I stop you there?
Yeah.
Based on that statement, that last statement that you just made, had it never been brought forward before that this sign was non-conforming, even when it was being used by Friendly's?
No, I was not aware that it was, when it was in use by Friendly's, that it was legal or not legal or non-conforming. I only became aware of it with this case. And at that time, the Friendly's didn't exist and the sign was no longer advertising Friendly's.
Okay,
It was a vacant sign. It was all the signage was removed.
and let me ask one other question. I mean, in your staff report here too, I'm looking at the paragraph that talks to the K&G Properties LLC property, where based on their initial submitted subdivision plat, this particular freestanding sign would actually be on lot 2 of that subdivision?
Well, initially, just to make it simple, there were two lots, lot 1 and 2. Lot one had the business. I may be having wrong, but for the sake of argument, lot 1 had a business and a freestanding sign was to be located on lot 2. That was advertising for lot 1. So they were required to redraw that property line whereby the freestanding sign was then located on lot 1 on the same property that the business it was advertising for.
Okay.
And that's exactly what I had mentioned earlier that this applicant could have done. But again, it goes to being located on the property you're advertising for.
Okay, thank you.
Going back to Mark's comments on premises, and I guess this is more for Karen than anything else as an interpretation. Mark's definition of premises are fairly narrow. I happen to go into Black's Law Dictionary to see another definition, or if there was anything different. And what I found, and I'm not trying to be a lawyer here, I'm just trying to get, I guess, answers to my legal question here. But it says in estates and property, land with its appurtenances and structures thereon. Premises is an elastic and inclusive term. It does not have one definite and fixed meaning. Its meaning is to be determined by its context and its dependence on circumstances in which used. And I'm just wondering, with the property owners being a part, or I guess, I don't know if they are a part of the application, but since the signage lot and the restaurant lots are owned by the same property owner, would they together, can they be considered premises for the, the purposes of this hearing? Or the fact that the one property is leased by another individual corporation, do we go with the interpretation of Mark in terms of what defines the premises?
Well, generally speaking, when you have a term that is not defined, the statutory construction would be to look at what the normal dictionary definition is for that word or that term. And Mark, or I'm sorry, Mr. Depot has offered his interpretation using, I forget which dictionary,
Merriam-Webster.
Merriam-Webster.
Okay.
So you're using just something that's a different dictionary, Black's Law Dictionary, which is a little going to have a different definition than Mr. Depot's using.
Mr.
So
Depot
you're
also referenced the planner's dictionary too.
Okay, so
I'm
so
sorry.
you're comfortable that we should use those definitions in our interpretation?
I believe the rules of statutory construction refer to just what the normal dictionary definition is of that term.
Okay, well, it's it's a law dictionary, so I thought it might be pertinent, that's all. Okay.
If I could, the A Planners Dictionary is a dictionary that the American Planning Association recommends and uses. And it's based on land use zoning definitions. So it was more related to what we're looking at today. So again, I try to use that. And again, I use the term premise that's used throughout the zoning ordinance. When you look at the examples in the staff report, you would, again, you read on premise for a home occupation, you would say that that means it's happening in that home, not on my adjacent property I may own. It's, again, and you look at the other examples throughout the ordinance, I think it's quite clear that that the definition provided is accurate. But
Okay. Anything else any other questions at this point? Go ahead, Mark.
Okay.
Say Mr. Depot.
Okay, in response to the 2009 comprehensive plan, the appellant's comprehensive plan comments are not applicable to the matter before the Board of Zoning Appeals, which is the appeal of a zoning determination regarding the use of the off-premise freestanding business sign. In addition, the zoning determination provided no comments or reference to the 2009 comprehensive plan. The appellant's statements related to the comprehensive plan are suitable when discussing the development of the Mission Barbecue property, building, parking, landscaping, and not the use of the off-premise freestanding business sign. Furthermore, infill development, which is referenced, refers to the development of unused or vacant properties or underutilized properties. The Mission Barbecue development did not develop an unused or vacant or underutilized property. As outlined in the March 17, 2021 Board of Zoning Appeals meeting, the comprehensive plan serves as a guide and does not regulate development such as signage in the city of Westminster. In fact, the 2009 comprehensive plan does not analyze or provide recommendations on signage. In addition, the zoning ordinance development in the city of Westminster is regulated by the 2013 Development Design Preference Manual. The off-premise freestanding business sign is not only located in a different property of the Mission Barbecue property, but it is not compatible with the 2013 Development Design Preferences. Throughout discussions with the appellant, and I did touch on this regarding the freestanding business sign, staff provided the appellant with the following possible options to provide a freestanding business sign at the property. One would be, again, to remove the off-premise freestanding business sign previously used by Friendly's, relocate the shopping center freestanding sign located on the Mission Barbecue property to the adjacent shopping center property and add a new Mission Barbecue freestanding business sign. on the property. Or two, submit a boundary line adjustment that would relocate the shopping center freestanding sign located on the Mission Barbecue property to the shopping center property and relocate the off-premise freestanding business sign previously used by Friendly's to the Mission Barbecue property. And that can be somewhat confusing, but I apologize for that. In conclusion, the appellant's arguments are based on erroneous and misleading information. The appellant has not demonstrated any error in the zoning determination. Following the interpretation of the zoning ordinance propounded by the appellant would completely undermine the signage requirements in the B business zone, as well as signage in other zoning districts, and create a new sign type that is not currently allowed in the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance is clear that an off-premise freestanding business sign is not permitted in the B business district. The zoning ordinance is also clear that on-premise freestanding business signs are permitted in the B business zone only when located on or upon the premises or property of the business, profession, commodity, service, or entertainment to which the sign is directing attention. The subject off-premise freestanding sign is not approvable by right or as a non-conforming sign or structure. The zoning administrator requests the Board of Zoning Appeals give considerable weight to the zoning administrator's interpretation and determination of the zoning ordinance, which the zoning administrator is responsible for administering and uphold and wholly affirm the January 26, 2021 zoning determination and deny the appeal. And that completes my report. And if I could place in the record the appellant's request for appeal application, the appellant's pre-hearing statement, and then staff report and its attachments.
Yes, so received.
Thank you.
Did you get those, Karen? Okay.
Yes, I did. And Mr. Chair, if I could go back just to the statutory construction issue in hopes that I can clarify it a little bit
All right,
for the board
please.
members, because in construing a statute, the courts have consistently relied on what's called the plain meaning rule, which holds that if the words of a statute construed according to their common and everyday meaning are clear and unambiguous and express a plain meaning, the courts will give effect to the statute as it's written. So it gets into the cardinal rule of statutory construction is to effectuate the intent of the legislature by looking at the whole scheme and the words surrounding it as well.
Okay. Does board members have any questions of Mr. Depo before we move on with applicant's presentation?
I don't know if it's for Mr. Depo, but I do have I know we have the property owner and the Mission Barbecue owner. Where this sign is located, the premise that this sign is located, is that on somebody else? I mean, what's happening and what's on that premise? Maybe we get to that and maybe that's,
Mark, can you address that?
It's the 140 shopping center itself. The majority of the shopping center and development out there is located on that property. Mission Barbecue is its own property that's cut out of the larger property of the shopping center.
Does that answer your question, Brenda?
for now, yeah.
Larry, you have anything
Mr.
else?
Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt again, but may I ask if there were any other communications that should be part of the record, or were it just those 3 exhibits? Was anything else received by staff?
Following the staff report, no, nothing else has been received by staff.
Okay, if there are no further questions from the board, I guess we'll turn this to Ms. Miller for your portion of the presentation. And if you have people who are going to testify, I'd like to be able to swear them all concurrently, if I may. And would you
Yes,
identify them, please?
Yes, I'd like to ask Roger Sullivan, Bob Polikoff, Adam Newble, and Andrew Graham to take the oath, please.
If I could see your hands, I can only see Mr. Polikoff at the moment. I'm not sure I can see everybody, but I trust you have your hand up, whoever can see them.
I see them all.
Okay, good. Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you are about to give is the truth?
I do.
I do.
I do.
All right, I think I heard them all. Thank you. Ms. Schaefer, it's yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. First, I think it's appropriate, I'm going to do a brief introductory or opening statement, but first I think it's appropriate to talk about the standard of review here because Mr. Depo got into that a little bit in his staff report. The standard of review that this board is tasked with looking at an appeal of this nature is it is written in actually your rules of order and procedure, section 2, which states that administrative appeals to the board shall be heard on the merits de novo. And de novo is commonly said to be with fresh eyes, which means that your role as a board is to step into the shoes of the zoning administrator and make a decision, which is exactly what we're asking of you here tonight. It's not to say that it's not relevant for Mr. Depo to explain his reasoning and logic, of course, absolutely, but it is to just say that your role, you are not obligated to give Mr. Depo's reasoning any deference here. You are looking at this case with fresh eyes as if you were the zoning administrator making this interpretation for the first time. So I know we've gone through a lot of complicated discussion as part of the staff report, but the real question here boils down to a relatively simple one on its face, which is, can this board interpret the ambiguous language of the code to allow Mission Barbecue to utilize what I'm going to refer to as the friendly sign as its one freestanding sign for its use? And I say ambiguous language, and I appreciate Ms. Ruff's just going through the statutory construction analysis, because it's very clear to me that the ambiguity here lies on the premises. And I think it's important to point out what she just said, which is that when there is that ambiguity, when there's not a clear meaning, which clearly there's not, because we have a 17-page staff report with multiple different citations, and you have all of this back and forth disagreeing on the interpretation, then you look to the intent. And that's what Mr. Depo just presented you with, his analysis of the code. And what I'm going to do tonight is present to you the opposite side of that. I understand that Mr. Depo has made perhaps similar decisions on this interpretation in other cases. I believe he just cited one to you. I forget the name that he referred to. In my opinion, that is not relevant to your decision here tonight. The fact that Mr. Depo has issued an interpretation that another person has agreed to, consented to, and gone with in a development has no bearing on our ability to say, hey, we think there's a differing interpretation here. So that's what we're doing here tonight. You've heard the undisputed facts, I'll call them, and I'll ask Mr. Gray. Mr. Gray, are you the one with the screen control, or is that someone else?
That is both me and Mr. Depot.
Okay, can whomever has screen control pull up that photo that I sent this evening, just for visual purposes?
I can do that, Mark, if that's fine with you.
I think it's helpful to talk about
Yes,
this
please.
while we're looking at the picture, because I know there's some confusion about which sign and where it is and all of that. So I have a picture that I just think is helpful from a visual perspective. Thank you. All right, can everybody see that? Okay,
Yes.
so that's a picture looking at obviously the developed Mission Barbecue site. Okay, Mission Barbecue is the lessee of lot 4. Now I'm going to try to make this as simple so that everybody's on the same page here. 140 Village Shopping Center is all under common ownership. Okay, they own lot 4, they own the greater shopping center that has what we know as the Shoppers in it, they own that Martin's piece, they own the Dunkin', they own that auto center. Okay, so they own all of this, but Mission Barbecue is on lot 4 of the greater shopping center. there is what you see, the large sign that says 140 Village Shopping Center on there. If you see that on the photograph, that sign is just inside the lot line for lot 4, okay? That empty sign, which was the former Friendly sign, is just outside of the lot line for lot 4. Lot 4 dates back to, over 20 years. Okay, so this was not, it's not like at the time these signs were put there, there was no lot 4. At the time these signs were put there, lot 4 existed as it exists today. This, the empty sign that you're looking at is the former Friendly sign, and even prior to that, a former Hardee's sign. The relevant section that we're looking here tonight of the code is 164-121, which Mr. Depo cited in his staff report, which says business signs pertaining to a use on the premises are permitted as an accessory use in the business zone. Mission Barbecue's in the business zone. None of us contest that this is the applicable language. The question is, what does that language mean? Other facts that are relevant here tonight, which I've kind of already mentioned some of, is that there's a 1997 Friendly site plan that shows an existing sign in the same location. Now, Mr. Depo says that wasn't approved as part of the plan. I'm not arguing with him on that, but I am saying that there is a 97 Friendly site plan that shows an existing sign in the same location as the Friendly sign. It also shows an existing sign in the same location as the 140 Village Shopping Center sign. We then have the June 11th, 2020 City's Planning and Zoning Commission approval of the Mission Barbecue site plan. Again, not approving signage, but does show the location of both of those existing signs. There's a county building permit, which again is not as detailed as I would like it to be, but I think you have all the authority to take administrative notice of this, and I would submit to you that that the county now holds all permit records, but prior to 2003, the city actually held their own permitting records, and the only permit records that the county holds are electrical permits. So there's building permit EO 980654 on file with the county that shows an electrical permit, again, no specificity, but for Friendly signage that was approved in November of '98. So this is all just to say that the facts here are very clear that this sign existed and was shown on multiple plans, the location of which has not changed. The lot line has not changed. None of these facts have changed as they are before you here tonight. So it is, as you heard, it's Mr. Depo's opinion that because the Friendly sign is just outside of the lot line of lot 4, that it is unambiguously prohibited by the language in Code Section 164-121. Tonight, I'm going to present some very brief testimony because this is really not the type of case that's ripe for testimony. It's more just code interpretation, like I said, but I will present testimony followed by commentary on closing that the language in the code is ambiguous, that the term premises is not defined in the code, okay? That equity is best served by allowing Mission Barbecue to continue to utilize this existing sign, and that this board has the unequivocal power to step into the shoes of the zoning administrator and interpret this ambiguous portion of the code to allow for Mission Barbecue to revitalize this sign. That's my goal here tonight, and I can also cite dictionary definitions too. Thank you, Mr. Brent, for your Black's Law Dictionary reference. I appreciate that. But with that, I am going to put on some very brief testimony from some of the people that you've sworn in here tonight. So unless there are any questions, I will proceed with that.
No, go ahead, please.
Thank you. If Mr.
Or have
Gray,
any other questions? No.
Mr. Gray, if it's best view for everyone to take down this photo while I do testimony, that's fine with me. I know on my screen everybody's faces become like this big when there's something else up there. So, okay. Thank you. First, I would call Mr. Bob Polikoff. So, Mr. Polikoff, can you please introduce yourself to the board?
My name is Bob Polikoff, although if you need a legal name, it's Robert Polikoff. I'm president of Federal Management Corporation. We are the authorized management agent for 140 Village LLP, the owner of the shopping center.
You heard me describe the shopping center, the 140 Village Shopping Center. Was that an accurate description?
Yes,
And are you aware of the historical uses on the full site, but specifically the site where now there's a Mission Barbecue?
yes.
Can you tell us what was there before Mission?
Before Mission was Friendly's. And before Friendly's, there was Hardee's.
Do you have any approximate dates of when each was first put there?
Hardee's, and this is just anecdotally from my contacts, is that it was built in the 1970s. Friendly's was constructed in 97 or 98.
And to your knowledge,
And I'm sorry, that involved the demolition of the Hardee's building and construction of a new building for Friendly's. The Mission Barbecue, although it's a new building, is located within the same footprint as the Friendly's building.
and to your knowledge, was the sign that we are talking about here tonight, was that in existence at those times?
Based on the 97 site plan that showed a demolition of the Hardee's building, yes, the signs were there at that time.
And are you aware of whether you or anyone else involved in the property ownership have ever been informed that the Friendly sign was an illegally existing sign or could not be used for
No.
the site where Friendly's was?
No.
Those are my only questions of Mr. Polikoff. If the board has any, I'm happy to open it up. If not, I will call Mr. Roger Sullivan.
I would just like to ask, just to kind of affirm, but to the best of your knowledge, Mr. Polikoff, that sign has been there across all three of those restaurants. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Do you know who erected that sign?
I do not.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I would call Mr. Roger Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan, can you please introduce yourself to the board?
Certainly. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your time this evening. As Kelly indicated, I'm Roger Sullivan. I act as general counsel to Mission Barbecue. And in that role, I'm usually down in the weeds. I negotiate the lease. I meet with the property owners. I do a lot of this kind of work. And that's the role I play for Mission Barbecue. And as has already been put into evidence, in this particular case, I signed the appeal, I signed the lease. So that's my general overall role with the company.
Is it fair to say that you've been intimately involved in this site development process for this property since its inception?
Extraordinarily intimately involved, yes.
Is the sign that we've been talking about here tonight the only freestanding sign that Mission has access to use under its agreement with the landlord?
That is exactly correct, yes.
Okay, so there's no intent, no plan, no request to have freestanding sign in what you saw in that photo as the bigger 140 Village Shopping Center sign, correct?
That's correct. And in fact, we don't have a right to that sign under our lease. And we're conspicuous by our absence on that. And in fact, the reason we're not on that sign was the expectation both on our part and the landlords that we would be refurbishing and utilizing the freestanding Friendly sign that we're talking about. So the answer to your question is yes. We only have a right to the quote unquote Friendly sign. That was our hope, expectation, and understanding.
Are you aware of the alternate options that Mr. Depot presented?
I am. I would say this about both of those options. They are, as Mr. Depot has pointed out, they are in fact options. I would suggest to this board that they are options in theory only. They are technical options. And the reason I say that is that both of the options presented, the first was a lot line adjustment and the second was to literally switch them. So if you were to look at them from the air, they're like this, right? One's on our quote unquote property line. The other is on the greater shopping center. And Mr. Depo's suggestion with respect to one of those options is to do this, right? Just move them. I get down in the weeds on all of these deals. This is our 101st site. It's our 19th in Maryland, our first in Carroll County. So I'm familiar with what those costs are. And I would suggest to this board that if we were to take option one to just move the signs, which we would have to get the landlord's approval, it's not our property, that would be in excess of $100,000. Easy. That's $100,000 suggestion, as opposed to leaving where they are and doing what we're asking. So option one from Mr. Depo, while it is technically possible, I would suggest to the board that's $100,000 ask of Mission Barbecue. Easy. The other option is to adjust the lot line, which would require us to engage civil engineers. And because it's a lot line adjustment, in my opinion, would also require a site plan approval, which we just spent the last 9 months getting. And I would suggest to the board that that also is a $100,000 endeavor. Easy. So while there are possibilities, frankly, they're unrealistic. And I would suggest to the board, they're commercially unreasonable. They're theoretically possible, but they're commercially unreasonable.
Is part of that reason because this project is already over budget?
I wasn't necessarily going to open that can of worms, but since you did, I would tell this board that this was our 101st store. We signed this lease on February 22nd, 2019. We opened up last Monday. It took us 2 years, 1 month, and 7 days to get open. We usually allocate 4 to 6 months for this. And it was things like this hearing, to be brutally honest. This location already is 17 months. It was 17 months behind schedule. And when I last checked our records, which was in the fall, we were, I think, $149,000 over budget. Civil engineers, your office, Ms. Schaefer Miller, architects. So we've already put more than $150,000 into this project on municipal obligations. And so Mr. Depo's suggestion, his two alternative processes, if we were to undertake them, would be another $100,000. And as you might imagine, we just don't bake that into the cake. That money just isn't there, to be honest. It's not allocated for those kind of expenditures.
Thank you. Those are my only questions of Mr. Sullivan, unless the board has any.
I guess I have a question, and I want to keep coming back to this. Mr. Sullivan, you characterized the use of that sign as a hope and expectation.
Yes, sir.
Given your admitted degree of being down in the weeds and the details, was that investigated up front? And if so, what came of it? Or if not, why not?
Yes, sir. It was. When we get into any given location, this one included, by the time that lease is signed, there have been a lot of eyes put upon it. My own local counsel, if we need it for zoning, historic preservation, those kinds of things. Civil engineers, our architect, the manager that's going to run it, the regional director of operations, the owners. So a lot of eyes go on that to make sure something doesn't slip through the cracks. And Mr. Chair, to answer your particular question, the expression, the hope and expectation, that was grounded in part on, I'd say, two things. One, the premises as a defined term in our lease. Now, we have a 10-year lease with 3 5-year options. So we are, as Ms. Schaefer Miller indicated, we're sort of the functional fee simple owners for the next, what's that add up to? 25 years. Right. And the premises is a defined term in the lease by virtue of an exhibit. That exhibit, showing the outline of our quote unquote premises, includes not only the pylon sign that we're not on and the friendly sign that we're not yet on, although we hope to be. And so the lease gives us all of that space. So where all of us, and this is the job of the BZA, obviously, this is what we've asked you to do, is that the distinction is that apparently the lot line runs in between, and it is the opinion of the zoning administrator that lot line, where it runs, makes it impermissible It is our opinion, based on our consultation with Ms. Schaefer Miller, that it remains permissible because it is under the auspices of the definition of the premises, number one, and number two, that it had been used for, our understanding was nearly 50 years uninterrupted. So to answer your question, Mr. Chair, it was our expectation and hope that because we were permitted to do it under the lease, it was part of the defined premises, and it had been used uninterrupted for in excess of 50 years, and we had received no objections from anyone along the way. We never expected to be sitting before you, Your Honor. We just didn't.
Well, I'm not an honor, but I accept your comment. But at the same time, and when a site plan was put forward,
Yes,
was
sir.
it included?
Yes, sir. As Ms. Schaefer Miller indicated, not only was it included on our site plan, but as Mr. Polikoff testified, it was on the Friendly's site plan. It was on our site plan. We typically don't and did not hear ask for signage approval in the site plan review process because that's just not where that's brought up. And it was only when we went to ask for that we were told no. And so, you know, when we get those kind of answers, I assure you, they come out of left field because a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of investigation, a lot of time, money, and effort goes into this. We don't like surprises any more than the next person. And, you know, we value being members of the community. Mission Barbecue's mission is to serve those who serve. And we make ourselves part of the fabric of this community, and we intend to do so here too. So I assure you, Mr. Chair, it was an absolute surprise to find that out and to be here this evening.
Okay, thank you. The board have any questions of Mr. Sullivan? I guess not. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Ms. Schaefer, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to call, I'll let Adam Newble and Andrew Graham decide who's most appropriate for this question, but both of them are representatives from Apple Signs, and I have one very brief question for them, which is, if approved, does this sign comply with the square footage requirements of the code without needing any sort of variance?
Yes.
Okay. And then I guess just for explanation purposes, can you explain the calculation there, please?
Sure. Let me see here. Good evening, board members. My name is Adam Newble. As I introduced before, I'm with Apple Signs. Regarding the square footage of the signage on the property, when we originally acquired to the city, I made contact with Mr. Gray and went through the signage requirements with him and what was needed to submit the application to obtain an approval. One of the first questions I always ask is, how do you calculate your sign area calculation? Is it simply just draw a box around the match, the extreme limits of the sign, or are we allowed to break it down into geometric shapes so it's not full of dead or negative space? And we were originally told that the four line calculation method, which was going to be used, which represents the numbers that Mr. Depo spoke to earlier, the signage, total cumulative signage right around 230 square feet. However, on December 1st, I received a call from Mr. Gray. We had submitted the applications and were told, and there was some back and forth about how this was going to be calculated. I received a call from Mr. Gray on December 1st saying that I could recalculate the signs area by removing the dead space by using multiple geometric shapes to determine the area, which in each case, that reduced the sign square footage from 72 square feet down to 52 square feet. It was a pretty substantial drop. And the one sign on the rear was lowered from 80 square feet down to 55 square feet. So based on that information, we revised the drawings, submitted them back to Mr. Gray. We received the approval of the wall mounted signage that's in place today on December 4th. Referencing the revised drawings that we submitted on 12/1, written at the bottom of the permit. So the total square footage based off of that approval on the site is 160.18 square feet. Per the zoning code, the method of determining the area permissible is gives you 3 times the linear foot of the frontage. In this case, the linear frontage of the building is 79 feet 1 inch, or 79.083 feet. You multiply that out, that gives you a grand total of permissible square footage at 237. You subtract that out, it leaves a remainder of 79 square feet, or excuse me, leaves a remainder of 77 square feet for this sign, which is in excess of rehabbing and utilizing the existing facilities that are there, the old friendly sign.
Thank you. Those are my only questions for Mr. Newble.
I would ask a question, Mr. Newble. So the decision to reduce the on-building signage was in part driven by the expected use of the standalone sign?
Correct. We wanted to leave extra space to allow for that because in the code, it only gives you a total square footage for all signage on the property. It doesn't specify you can only have 100 square feet of wall mounted versus 50 square feet of freestanding or an awning or some other signage. So it gives you a cumulative square footage. And so that's part of the reason why we wanted to not necessarily back it down, but demonstrate. We could have gone larger, but we wanted to leave the space to accommodate the rehab of the existing structure. Mr. Chairman.
And was that clear to city staff that was the intent?
I'm going to defer to Ms. Schaefer Miller on this, but that is my understanding of it. I was not privy to that conversation, the initial conversation with the city.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kramer, I think that was kind of in the midst of our discussions with city staff about allowance of using this pylon sign and making an official zoning determination. And it was in the midst of that discussion that we were calculating square footage and having those discussions.
Okay, thank you.
Those are my only witnesses that I intend to call. I do have a relatively lengthy closing statement that's really legal argument in opposition to Mr. Depot's that he presented at the beginning of his presentation. So I'm not sure if it's more appropriate for this board to, if they would like to hear any additional comments from Mr. Depot, or if they'd like me to present this information, I'll leave that at your discretion.
Any further questions from the board? I guess not.
Not for me, no.
No, I don't have any.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Miller.
Thank you. So as you're all aware, tonight, our request is that you interpret this section of the code to allow Mission Barbecue to utilize the existing friendly sign. Again, I'm going to just refer to it as the friendly sign. And the section of the code that we're looking at is 164.121. That being said, I did have the opportunity to watch your last month's kind of business meeting presentation, and I thought Mr. Depot made a good point during that presentation, which is in looking at the intent, it's really helpful to look at the ordinance as a whole. And I think that's key with the information I'm going to present to you. So I'd ask you to keep that in mind. Our code has a signage article, a full article devoted to signage. Section 164.117 states the purpose and intent of that article. I'm going to read it for you here. The purpose of the requirements set forth in this article, which regulate the location, size, placement, and certain features of signs, is to enable the public to locate goods, services, and facilities without difficulty, danger, or confusion, to prevent wasteful use of natural resources and competition among businesses for attention, to prevent hazards to life and property, and to assure the continued attractiveness of the city and the protection of property values. I would submit to you, and as you've heard testified to here tonight, this sign has a historic use that the public associates with this property. It enables the public to locate this use even better because there's that community recognition from the long-standing use of this sign. And I did reference the city's comprehensive plan in my pre-hearing statement, and I don't think that it's totally irrelevant as Mr. Depo suggested, because if you look at the definition of the comprehensive plan in the city's zoning code, it is to guide the adoption of the zoning code. And this is what we're looking at here tonight, the zoning code. So the city's comprehensive plan also references these similar purposes and intents behind signage. Utilizing this existing sign prevents the wasteful use of natural resources because it eliminates destroying one sign to relocate for another sign. That's more of a common sense argument. There's no hazard to life, property, or harm to property values as a result of this sign. And I'll also suggest to you that we see no callers, no comments from the public on this. There's no public concern about Mission Barbecue utilizing that sign. In contrast to that, I think it would continue the attractiveness by allowing the revitalization of that sign. If you look to that picture, that photograph that was shown at the beginning, right now, that sign's unattractive. Mission Barbecue's request is to revitalize that sign. Just like some might say that perhaps the Mission Barbecue's reconstruction of the Friendlies has improved that site. It would be a similar improvement to this sign. We had similar conversations back when Starbucks, with the Starbucks signage. And, I think it's important to point out here that this sign exists among existing commercial development. So to request use of a sign of this nature, of this height at a new site where there is not existing signage, perhaps that is inappropriate. But at a site where it's an existing sign, it's amongst, if you can just recall from driving down 140, because I know all of you are very familiar with 140, the signage in that shopping center, this is one of the average to perhaps even lower signs of some of the uses in there. So, there has to be some weight given to allowing Mission Barbecue to have the commercial competitiveness that others in the shopping center do. I also submitted a photograph that was with the pre-hearing statement that shows the view. And again, you're all very familiar with Westminster, so I don't know that it needs to be brought up for you. But the view, if you're sitting at that traffic light at Gorsuch and 140, if you're sitting on 140 looking up with the Mission site on your right, you cannot see the Mission building. You cannot see the on-building signage. You can see that pylon sign. So I don't think it's completely relevant because there's no need element here for us to prove, but I think it's worthwhile pointing out to you that this is a very valuable sign. This is not just another sign on the property. This is a freestanding sign that has visibility all the way down from that Gorsuch Road and 140 intersection, which happens to also be on the side of the road where people would then turn into this site to utilize this site. The key portion of the code that Mr. Depo cites and that I also cited is 164.121, which guides on-premise business signs. And I've read it before, I'll read it again. Business signs pertaining to a use on the premises are permitted as an accessory use in the business zone. Now, going to the statutory construction argument, when an attorney looks at this language, it's important to analyze the capitalization, the grammar, all of those things. And I think it's important to note to this board that, for example, business zone is capitalized because that refers to a defined zone in the city ordinance. Premises is not a defined term. It's not capitalized in this, and it's not defined in the city code. If premises were defined in the city code and said premises means the actual lot lines of a property, then we wouldn't be here before you tonight. It would be an open and closed case, but it does not say that. So that's why we are here tonight. This is the basis for Mr. Depo's denial, but it's not defined in the ordinance. It does not say lot line or property line. So instead, we have to look at the interpretation and the intent of the whole code in analyzing whether this is appropriate and whether if you were to grant a favorable interpretation here in Mission Barbecue's favor, whether that would be in conformance with the intent of the code. So here we have a sign that's been used on the site since at least 1998. We have written record of that, perhaps even prior to that from the Hardee's use. The lot has been the same since at least 1998, meaning that this sign has always been over that lot line, okay? This sign is right next to the lot line. We're not talking about a sign that's 200 feet down 140. If we were, again, perhaps different case, but we're not. We're talking about a sign that's right on the lot line. This is the only sign that's to be used on the premises. Mission Barbecue is not trying to get one over on the city by putting its signs in the other greater shopping center, 140 Village Center signs. This is the only freestanding sign that Mission Barbecue would be utilizing. It's clear to me, and perhaps this is also because I have some historic knowledge of the city and county zoning ordinances, that the intent of the code is to prevent off-premises business signs. And what we usually call them are billboards. There's been a historical community dislike, whatever you want to call it, for billboards. So if we were proposing that type of use, I would say to you, that would absolutely be against the intent of the code, because the intent of the code is to prohibit those uses. The intent of the code is not to prohibit this sort of instance. When you look at all the facts here, you look at the proximity to the site, you look at the fact that this has been used since at least 98, you look at all of these factors together, you are meeting the intent of the code under this interpretation. You're not approving a billboard. This is, I don't want to draw too many analogies, but perhaps if you had a site that was 20 acres, would a use on the premises sign be located 10 acres down from the use? There are a lot of things that need to be looked at when interpreting this, and I would refer back to Mr. Brent's reading of the Black's Law Dictionary definition of premises, because I think, and I would also point out to you that the Random House Dictionary definition, another commonplace dictionary, actually reiterates Black's Law Dictionary definition and not the definitions offered to you by Mr. Depo. So I think you can take all of those definitions together and saying that the point of this term not being clearly defined is so that there is room for interpretation. And that's what we're asking you to do here tonight. We are not asking you to defy the purpose of the city code. This sign there, also backing up just to point out that a site plan was approved for the site. Signage does not always receive approval as part of a site plan. So again, to suggest that that was the only mechanism for approving a friendly sign, I just think that's a misnomer. Signage can be approved outside of a site plan. The signage location was very clearly shown on the friendly site plan of 97. So whether it was approved or not, I'm not getting into that, but it was very clearly shown the location of those signs at that time. From an equity principle here, I've said it 100 times during this presentation, but this sign received some permit. It received an electrical permit in 98. It was shown on the friendly site plan in 97. It was shown on the Mission Barbecue site plan just a few months ago. There's been justifiable reliance on the part of Mission that they'd be allowed to use this existing sign for the use. And Mr. Kramer, I want to point out, just for clarification in Mr. Sullivan's testimony, that this was not brought up during a site plan pre-submittal meeting. This was not, when Mr. Sullivan said it was unexpected, this was not part of any of the initial conversations with staff. This was brought up at first, and I believe Mr. Depo lays out this specific timeline, but that was the first time Mission Barbecue was aware that they couldn't use this sign was when Apple Signage, Andrew Graham, and Adam Newble started having conversations with the city about submitting signage permits. So that's the first time this came to our attention. And, this really is a valuable location to have a sign. So I think it's unfair to dismiss signage just because there's some on building signage. The two options that have been presented, I guess, as a means of saying that either we don't have to be here or we can't be here tonight before you. I think first of all, it's incorrect to say that that means we can't be here just because there are other options. But in terms of could we make these other options work? You heard from Mr. Sullivan that they're really just not viable options. And to what benefit, I would ask, to what benefit would it be for anyone, the city, the property owner, to pick up the signs and switch them? I mean, I'm at a loss on that one. So, you know, I think in addition to cost, just there's no benefit. There's no benefit to the city and there's no benefit to the property owner. You can meet the intent of the code by making this favorable interpretation here tonight without creating a precedent. This does not create a precedent. This is a factual based analysis where you're looking at the intent of the ordinance, you're looking at the language that's there, and you're looking at the specifics of this site. So I think, you know, I don't want you to be discouraged that this creates an intent that you've legislatively changed the zoning ordinance. I do not think that's an accurate depiction. From just a community standpoint, I'll say that we've had no community involvement through this entire process. This being one portion of the process, but there's been no negative community involvement through the site development plan. We had an administrative adjustment hearing, and now we're before this board, and we see that there's no one on here to negatively comment on this. And I think that's also worth saying, because in looking at the health, safety, and welfare element of the code, it's important to note that there's no one here, and that all the surrounding property, or a lot of the surrounding property, is under common ownership. So I'm aware that the board has the criteria for determination set forth in 164, 169. I'm happy to go through those. I think some of them are not relevant, but I'm going to point out a few that I think are relevant. So one of the sections says the most appropriate use of land and structure. I would submit to you there's no more appropriate use of this land than for a restaurant commercial use. And why not utilize the existing sign without having to destroy any additional natural resources? One of the most important I'll draw your attention to is 9. I guess it's B 164, 169, subparagraph B9 says the purpose and regulations is set forth in the chapter. And that's what I've just harped on, which is you are not undermining the purpose of this zoning chapter by making this favorable interpretation. There are many in here that are just not applicable, and there are several that there's really no negative impact to, such as traffic conditions, facilities, the conservation of property values. All of those are really, there's no negative impact that we've heard associated with those. And then the last is just 15, which is the contribution, if any, that such proposed use, building, or addition would make toward the deterioration of areas and neighborhoods. And I would say to you that this is the opposite. This provides an opportunity for Mission Barbecue to revitalize this existing sign. So for all of those reasons, and I'm happy to answer any questions about definitions or specifics there, but I think you have all the information that you need to make a favorable interpretation of the code here in Mission Barbecue's favor, to use that sign, finding that the code is ambiguous and stepping into the zoning administrator's shoes and looking at the intent of that signage section of the code. So I would ask you to do that here tonight, and I'm available for any questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Questions from the board?
None for me.
I don't have any questions either.
Mr. Depot, do you have any crossback questions?
I have some rebuttal comments, and I may have some questions for Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Noble. Again, Ms. Miller keeps talking about section 164, 121, on-premise business signs and business signs pertaining to a use on the premises are permitted as accessory business zone. But she also mentioned, and I mentioned, that you have to look at the zoning ordinance in its entirety, and she keeps passing over the definition of business sign, which is sign which directs attention to a business or profession or to a commodity, service, or entertainment sold or offered upon the premises where the sign is located. Again, you have to look at the ordinance in its entirety. And I do not believe the ordinance is ambiguous. If you look at the use of on premise, on the premise, upon the premise, off premise, throughout the ordinance, I think it's quite clear in every case that it means on premise is occurring on the property. Otherwise, why would you have off premise used in the ordinance? Otherwise, why would, in the examples provided, clearly a reasonable mind would say an on premise home occupation is happening in the house on that property, not on another house or an adjacent house or a house that might be close by, but on a different property. As far as precedent setting, I disagree. Again, Ms. Miller stated you are stepping in the shoes of the zoning administrator. So to make a decision that an off-premise business sign is allowed, you are making that interpretation. So I would disagree that a precedent would not be being made. You are determining what the ordinance states for as far as on-premise, off-premise. The electrical permits, the city does not review electrical permits. I don't think it was made clear whether that electrical permit was for the freestanding sign, for a building mounted sign for Friendly's. So that's a little unusual. Again, we would not see an electrical permit. We would get a sign permit and a sign application, and we would approve that. Or a building permit, and we would review that. The issue about the site plan showing the sign. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but when a site plan is submitted, we ask that you show all adjacent buildings and structures. It's just not the site plan and the property we're looking at. We look at the adjacent elements as well. So on that Friendly site plan, it showed adjacent structures, one of them being an existing sign off the property, just like it would show existing buildings, existing parking, other existing elements off that property of the site plan. So it's not uncommon that you would show a structure that's off the site. It did not approve that freestanding sign for Friendly's. It just showed an existing structure occurring adjacent to the Friendly's property. I guess the other issue too, as Mr. Sullivan brought up, and I would like to hear his comment on this. The applicant was made aware of this, that the freestanding sign was an issue. I can't speak to the pre-hearing meeting because why would staff ever assume that Mission Barbecue wanted to use an off-premise sign? If they would have brought that to our attention, I think that would have been discussed. They did propose initially with submissions of site plan to use the off-premise sign. Staff requested that in our comments and review of the initial submission of site plans to remove that because it was not permitted because it was an off-premise sign. We've been consistent with that, that standard and that interpretation with several communications with Ms. Miller and the applicant and Mission Barbecue. We have not wavered in that determination that it's not allowed. So to say they were surprised is a little shocking. I'm surprised by that because again, I feel we were informing them throughout this process that it was not allowed. The Friendly sign, if you want to get more detailed, the Friendlies ended or ceased to exist on November 27th, 2018. For a nonconformity to remain nonconforming, you have a 48-month period. So it's questionable whether, I forget the time frame exactly, but there's a time period before it becomes whether it's nonconforming or not, it loses that status, and in other words, needs to be removed. And furthermore, it's intended to be used to identify the business is on the property it's advertising for. So again, the nonconformity issue still comes up. Sorry, there's a lot and I apologize. And Mr. Sullivan had mentioned that there was a third option, which I apologize, staff did not provide. Why not place Mission Barbecue signage on the shopping center sign? That would certainly relieve any issue of additional freestanding signs. So again, they have that option. Mr. Sullivan said, however, they do not have any power over that sign or the freestanding sign for that matter. So that was an interesting comment. Mr. Noble, I can't speak too much to the signage. I can only go by the applications that you submitted that state 97 or 79 square feet for each sign. That was not changed by you. And I do agree with your comment that the signage by the ordinance is all signage allowed on the property. So I thank you for that statement. And that's exactly what staff has stated, that when you determine signage, it's for all the signage allowed on the property, not on another property or adjacent. It's on the property of the business. I've never heard a sign being termed a natural resource. I think if you look at the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance, metal freestanding sign structure would not be considered a natural resource. As far as attractiveness, again, I'll go back to the design manual and the planning commission in past approvals. This is not the type of sign that the city is trying to have within the 140 corridor or throughout the city. We're looking at more monumented freestanding signs that you'll see with Honda dealership recently, or the recent 7-Eleven site, or the recent Sheets development. This popsicle type of sign is not what the city and the mayor and common council were looking for when they approved the design manual. As far as value, and I apologize for the cost, but again, I don't believe that's relevant in the determination as to what on-premise and off-premise is and whether they can use this sign. So again, and point out one more time that again, the appellant is not providing any information demonstrating my error in my determination, or that provided any section of the ordinance that says otherwise, that I'm incorrect, other than she believes it's ambiguous and it's not defined. So again, I think the determination and the staff report provided is clear that, and using the zoning ordinance in its determination to determine that on-premise means on the property. And that's all I have. If you have any questions.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask for a 5-minute recess? My computer's showing that I'm getting low on my battery and I have to go get my plug. And I want to make sure I don't cause any problems. So we take a 5-minute recess, maybe 2 minutes?
I think that's acceptable. Yeah, we don't want to lose you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Kramer, I'd like to be heard briefly, I promise, when we resume.
Okay. Hello. Yeah. Yes. Okay. All right. Thanks. Bye.
Karen Kramer, I just want to point out that you're not muted. And so, just so you know, that we can hear that conversation.
Thank you.
I think that's it.
Okay. Everybody back present, I presume? I can't see everybody for some reason, anyway. Ms. Levan, you wanted to offer something?
Apologize.
Ms. Levan, are you there?
She's on mute.
Oh. Ms. Levan, you wanted to offer something?
Yes. Oh, thank you. Okay, so I just want to make a couple of points about the argument. Mostly because I think that the idea that this is not going to establish a precedent is incorrect, and as I think that is the basis for the zoning administrator's adamant position in this case. I don't think he has any specific distaste for this specific project, but I think that to say that how you define premises in this case is not going to have an impact in the future is just incorrect. So there was a sign going back as far as Ms. Schaefer-Miller says. We don't question that. But there's no evidence that that sign always advertised the use that was on the Friendly's lot. We don't have any reason to conclude that when it was erected, it didn't advertise a use that's on the 140 Village lot. So the fact that the sign itself goes back all that far just doesn't have any relevance, any bearing on the present question. The fact that an illegal sign existed for years doesn't make it right. It makes it at best a nonconformity, and that's covered by section 164-125, which provides that it can't carry over. A nonconformity with respect to a sign doesn't have any grace period. It only continues as long as the use that nonconforming sign advertised continues. And so whether in fact it did advertise other uses previously doesn't make this any more a permitted carryover of a non-conforming use. The lack of a definition in the zoning ordinance for the term premises doesn't by itself make the term ambiguous. If you define premises as including separate lots, it loses all meaning. It means that every time you use the word premises in the zoning ordinance, you could be talking about the next door lot, the lot behind it, the lot across the street. And I will say this about signs being on premises or off premises. Ms. Schaefer-Miller has said that what makes this ambiguous is that the term itself, premises, isn't defined in the ordinance, but the converse actually is. So for example, if you look at section 164-122, which talks about outdoor advertising signs, it says commonly referred to as billboards. So our zoning ordinance calls billboards outdoor advertising signs. So when she talked about billboards, you probably got this vision of, you know, these big signs that, you know, are on the side of the road when you go to Ocean City. But for our zoning ordinance, they're all outdoor advertising signs that aren't on premises signs. And outdoor advertising signs do have a definition. Hang on, let me get there. Yeah, so under sign, come outdoor advertising, it's a sign or structure which directs attention to a business, commodity, service, or entertainment, not necessarily conducted, sold, or offered on the premises upon which the sign is located. So that's significant. The fact that one of the witnesses was never told that the sign was illegal or non-conforming is not evidence that it wasn't in fact illegal or non-conforming. It's just evidence that he didn't know, and that's not relevant to your determination. The fact that Mission doesn't have permission from the landlord for a different sign because they expected to be able to use the illegal sign is bootstrapping. It's, I failed to comply with the law because I expected not to have to, and therefore I made no provision to comply with it. So that's not, it's not an argument that has logical bearing on the question of whether or not this sign complies, because that's what's before you. Does this sign comply? Not what did they expect? What did they know? In fact, you know, it's their responsibility to know what the law is with respect to their property. It is not, you know, the zoning ordinance doesn't, the zoning administrator doesn't, you know, ride around town and try to discover hidden nonconformities. He responds to applications and questions that are addressed to him. So similarly, testimony that it will be expensive, even very expensive, to comply with the law doesn't change what the law is. How they define their premises in their lease, also irrelevant. It's completely unreasonable to think that third parties can contractually define the terms in the zoning ordinance to meet their own interests. I mean, you just can't define zoning ordinance terms with reference to a private contractual document between third parties. So those are, I mean, that's it. Those, I just needed to make those points before you adjourn to deliberate.
I also have some follow-up comments, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Ms. Miller.
Thank you. Just in light of what Mr. Depo just stated and Ms. Levan, I think this is a mischaracterization of Mission Barbecue as an applicant here. The plans that I referenced, the friendly site plan, those sorts of things that show the location of a sign are all city record. Then we have Maryland land records that show plats of the property, and we have survey plats showing the lot line. So there's public record showing where the existing signs were in the lot line. You know, and then we have Mr. Polikoff's uncontroverted testimony that that sign was historically used for Friendlies and prior to that Hardee's. So I don't think it's fair or accurate summation to say that we don't have any evidence that that sign was used for that purpose. I also want to say that I have not submitted a non-conforming use argument here tonight. I have submitted an argument that this board has the authority, acting as the zoning administrator, to interpret this language to allow for the use of this sign. So I think that's perhaps maybe I was not clear enough about that. I know Mr. Depo presented it in his staff report, but what we are asking this board to do is to look at that language in the code and interpret it like looking at a global interpretation of everything, just as Mr. Depo and just as Ms. Levan said. The definition of premises, again, not asserting that because it's defined in the lease as a certain thing, that that's how you should apply it. But that certainly goes to show that premises, when it's not defined in a zoning code, can have multiple interpretations. If the intent of the code were that this sign be on the lot, then it very clearly could have said that this sign is on the lot. That's what the code could have said. The code has a definition of lot. So that would have been a very clear and unambiguous way of saying it. To use the words on the premises that are not defined in the code is inherently ambiguous, because otherwise we wouldn't be having this debate and we wouldn't all be offering these multiple dictionary definitions and statutory construction arguments to you. Mr. Depo said, this is not the type of sign that the city's looking for. And that was a quote that he just said to you in his summation. And that's exactly what I see as happening is Mr. Depo does not think this is an attractive sign and does not want it revitalized. And here's a way to interpret the zoning ordinance in a way that disallows that. This is right for your interpretation. And that's why I would ask you, as for all the reasons I've stated and for the authority that you have in the code to make that interpretation here tonight. Precedent, I know Ms. Levan just stated that this does create precedent. This isn't a specific analysis that I'm asking you to make. The proximity, the historical use, all of these things that we've talked about here tonight. So that is what one does when interpreting the ordinance. It's something Mr. Depo could have done and chose not to at his full discretion and authority. But that's something this board can do in this situation and looking at all of the things that have been presented to you tonight. So I just really felt it was a mischaracterization to say that there had been nothing put on tonight that showed that sign had historically been used for that use. I think that's completely untrue, and we heard the opposite testimony. So thank you.
Has the board have any questions toward any testimony so far?
I do not.
I guess I'm struggling with the definition. But I guess I'm more concerned about the decision that we make if we were to make a favorable decision, that it establishes a precedent. It's kind of been my experience over time on this board that each case stands on its own and is based on its own merits. So I guess I need some clarification, either from Mark or I guess from Ms. Levan, in terms of being more or less the keepers and major city interpreters of the code. That we aren't so wrapped around the definition of premise as we are to establishing a precedent. Either of you want to respond to that?
Well, I would say that from my perspective, it's only with respect to the definition of premises that I'm concerned about the precedent. I agree with Ms. Schaefer-Miller that it is unlikely that you're gonna confront factual circumstances that are substantially similar to the ones that are before you. It's just with respect, my concern is with respect to if you say a premises can include a separate lot, then that has ramifications in other cases.
Okay. And in as much as, I guess this is a question for Mark, for Mr. Depo. If I understood, and maybe on the either for Ms. Miller for that matter, or any of the people she has testifying, that there is or will be a request to put Mission Barbecue on the main 140 Village Shopping Center sign. Is that correct?
No, there is no intent and there will be no request to put Mission Barbecue signage on the main shopping center sign. This would be the only freestanding sign that Mission Barbecue would utilize.
And why was that? I mean, why wasn't the main sign considered? That kind of shows everybody in the shopping center.
Well, whether people agree or disagree with it, it was because Mission Barbecue thought that they could use the one freestanding sign, the friendly sign. So that was the negotiation. And whether people think that that was unintelligent of Mission Barbecue to negotiate it that way or not, that was why Mr. Sullivan explained it, just to explain the thought process and the analysis that went into it. That's the reason.
Okay. One final answer, question here from board. Any additional questions?
No questions from me.
All right, so I guess at this time, we will officially close testimony.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Okay, Mr. Gray?
I think this is the proper time to do this. There is a comment from the public on Facebook, and I would like to read that to the board. Victoria Simmons Bader mentioned posting a slide of the items being discussed would be helpful. And I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention, that there was public comment on the Facebook video. And that is the only public comment, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And that reminds me too, before we close, I have also received, only to me, 2 emails. One addressing me, as I said, and no one else. One coming from Joe Dominic saying, and I'll quote here, and we can enter these as acceptable. I'm writing to you today as a resident and business owner here in the city of Westminster. The city's planning department is doing exactly what they should to protect the integrity of how our city is built out. And this is a perfect example of why boards of zoning appeals exist, to help provide exceptions when the broad brush of zoning code doesn't work for every individual situation. I have read Mission Barbecue's application and the letters sent by their legal counsel and agree with their argument. I hope that the Board of Zoning Appeals grant Mission Barbecue's request concerning their signage location. Thank you. Signed, Joe Dominic, founder, and address and phone number and contact information. The other came from Greg Pecoraro. Dear Mr. Kramer, I am writing in my personal capacity to urge the Westminster Board of Zoning Appeals to grant the request of Mission Barbecue in their appeal of an administrative decision made by the city's Department of Planning and Zoning concerning signage at their location in Westminster. I have reviewed their application and the letter sent by their attorney, Kelly Schaefer, and believe that they have made a strong argument. Thank you for your consideration. Respectfully, Gregory Pecoraro. I guess as part of public comment, we would include these 2 emails, which I can forward. They came only to me, like I said, and I will forward them to be part of the record. Any questions about those 2?
And they would be exhibits 4 and 5 respectively?
Correct. Thank you, Karen. And
He's frozen. Of course he is.
Mr. Chairman, you're frozen. Hey, Ed. Mr. Chairman.
And he's gone.
And he's gone. Okay. Okay, I'm vice chair. So
This is
I'll
what
tap-
happens when it goes over 8:30.
Yeah, so I'll tap dance for a little bit. Well, I guess I don't want to carry things on until Ed gets back because we're really, I guess, into board deliberations at this point. So I think if everybody is patient, hopefully he'll return. I hope his battery didn't run out.
Anybody call him or text him and let him know that he's not on?
Andrew, I don't have Ed's information, so.
Andrew, can you give a shout?
Yes, I will.
I'm
One
calling him right
second.
now.
Thank you.
He's having difficulty reconnecting.
Can he just call in?
Do you want to call in on your phone if you can't reconnect?
Here he comes. Maybe. There he is. You're on mute, Ed. Yeah. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Jeez.
Uh,
All right, let's
technology.
do that. Let's do this quick. I don't know what happened. It just all of a sudden disappeared. Discussion amongst the board.
I think sometimes we have to look at the whole picture, and when I think of premises, I'm thinking of the owner of the entire organization, the entire, all of the lots put together. I just can't imagine not utilizing the signage that's been used there for, we believe, years. You know, I'm sure there's pictures of 140 showing that one friendly sign for a long time. But if we're looking at the term, if the whole thing is looking at the term premises, I do believe it can be interpreted of the premises of the 140 Village, the owners of that entire property. So that's just all that and before we vote, I wanted to put my opinion of what premise really does mean.
Okay. First of all, I apologize. My reference early on to the Black's Law Dictionary definition of premises was really for point of information to council, I guess, more than anything. It wasn't that I was trying to get into the substantive discussion between the parties here. But I personally have kind of been going back and forth in my own mind on this. And I think the point that Brenda raises about defining the premises to include, it doesn't say the lease premises. If it says lease premises, then clearly you can argue that the friendly sign is off the site plan. But, I think that you have to look to the entire premises in this case, since truly, it may have been there for 50 years. So obviously one could argue, like Ms. Levan did, that, it's non-conforming use. Non-conforming use ends when its use is changed or revised or terminated. But I just think, the uses that it has had, there's no clear indication in any of the records, which I think were kind of agreed to by the city, that there's nothing there that makes it a non-conforming use or doesn't make a non-conforming use. It just has to be, it's been used for 50 years, and therefore, the city at this point is deeming it to be a non-conforming use. I just think that I think to some extent, the city has a responsibility when it's taking on a site plan review. The information is there for everybody. The information that sign was being used and that became a part of the site plans as this project was going through the city approval process. I think the city has a responsibility to raise a warning flag early on and not bring something up at the 11th hour. I think that, again, I'm weighing pros and cons here. And I don't think we're not creating any legislation here. If it's narrowed to this specific site and this specific signage, I don't think we're creating precedents here. I just think that the definition of premises and what the appellant wants to do meets the intent of the sign code. I think it meets the intent of the parties, which means the city and Mission Barbecue. I think it can be argued that the city staff on this particular project was actually, for most of the project, was doing its review and its approvals based on the assumption that the sign, was usable by the appellant. If the decision is a narrow site-specific decision, we're not creating precedents, and I don't see that we're harming the zoning code by taking this position. Again, I've been going back and forth all night on this, but I think on the whole, I think I have to agree that we should approve or actually deny, I guess, or overturn the planning administrators or director. I'm sorry. Mark, I'm not sure your official title, but overturning the decision that was made based on this application. So that's kind of where I'm going.
Well, I too have wavered back and forth here, and I've listened to, and I think both sides of the case have been presented well and in a level of detail that probably makes it even more complicated, but does draw out every piece of the code as written, and for the most part, generally accepted, not just interpreted. I guess what I have zeroed in on more than anything else is a couple of things. One, that the property owner has joined the application of Mission Barbecue. So to the extent that one goes back and looks at the definition as discussed here, as what is on the premises, the sign is clearly on the premises of 140 Village Limited Liability Partnership. Does that mean that an occupant on that property, on that larger property, include all of those different lessees, as well as their signage? If they have their own signage, they do mostly on buildings, and there's no other freestanding signage except that which seems, I believe, which is alongside 140 as well as 97. But that's also a village, 140 village sign on that side, I believe. So what kind of is distracting to me to some degree is that one particular sign will essentially, as a non-conforming sign, would seemingly have no use whatsoever going forward. Except with what Mr. Depot talked to in terms of the K&G Properties, LLC properties application, subdivision application, which, if I'm reading his testimony and heard his testimony correctly, would put that sign on lot 2 of that submitted subdivision plat, where it would seem logical that they would intend to use that signage as well. So I don't know. I'm struck by how the property lines are drawn there, and I also am cautious and very cautious about the statement made by the zoning administrator, by Mr. Depot, that this would create a new off-premises freestanding sign type, not currently listed or permitted. And while I'm all for standing by the code so that we have orderly growth in the community, this particular instance just seems to me to be, I don't want to belittle it, but it's a lesser or a minor consideration. And while I understand the intent to dress up signage going forward, perhaps the best remedy here and I would expect the zoning administrator would bring it forward quickly if there's concern about establishing a new defined sign, freestanding sign. But it seems to me to be the best use of the sign. And it has been for a long time. The other part of it is when I look at those buildings along 140 there in that shopping center and the type of signage that was put on the side of Mission Barbecue, it pretty much stands out on their own. So I'm wavering here between the whole notion of premises and trying to define signs, new off-premises freestanding sign type, versus using that sign in as much as they were going to dress it up as well. So I'm kind of leaning toward, while I want to stand with the code, I'm kind of leaning toward letting Mission Barbecue have this sign, let them continue to use it, and then we sort out the real guts of what on premises really means, and get that definition of the code so we don't run into this in the future. That's kind of
Yeah,
where I am.
I was just going to say, I was coming to the same point there, that obviously, at least for this particular case, the issue of premises is a major, stumbling point or point of disagreement, and maybe it's time for the code to to actually, step up and define what the word means. That's just a suggestion maybe to the city.
Yep. I would agree, I think. So somebody want to make a motion here?
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
if I could just ask that the motion be prefaced with a statement that you have found that the Mission Barbecue has standing to appeal the zoning determination, and then go on with whatever your motion would be.
okay. Yeah, I think that's reasonable. That's the other issue that we had to deal with before we really got into this.
Okay,
I guess, go ahead.
I say I would move the following, that the Board of Zoning Appeals I don't know, is of the opinion that the appellant does have standing to appeal the zoning administrator's decision on the issues presented before this board, and that the Board of Zoning Appeals overturns the decision made by the zoning administrator based on the evidence that we have received at this hearing.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So unanimously passed. That Mission Barbecue can use that sign.
So that was something I tried to ask. I'm sorry, I was muted and it didn't come out. So you're overturning the zoning administrator's decision and authorizing the use of that sign
Yes, yes,
by Mission Barbecue.
yes.
Yes.
Okay, I want to thank everybody for your patience and for your detailed work. I think this was a really good and a very hard discussion. Not being no other business before the board this evening, we are adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Good night.
Good night.